Hey guys, well, to start off this Monday with some very interesting news, Apple executives have been holding secret talks to potentially buy Perplexity of all companies, which is a very, very interesting purchase on Apple's part. Now, this kind of follows the trend of some of this actually might be starting a trend here. There has been a lot of AI companies, well, not necessarily AI companies, tech companies that have tried to involve themselves in the AI space that have fallen behind greatly. For example, Meta, Microsoft, Apple, the likes of those companies, right? Meta's technique as of right now has been just throwing money at the problem. What Meta is doing is they're buying stakes or outright acquiring companies that have already gotten a better foothold in the industry and spending money to hire people with more expertise and things like that. Apple is maybe taking a similar approach because apparently they might be buying Perplexity, at least according to Bloomberg. We're going to go ahead and cover it in today's video. Let's get right into it. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and read this article by Reuters. Apple executives are holding internal talks within their company about potentially buying Perplexity. Now, if you aren't already aware of what Perplexity is an AI search engine. That's the long and short of it. It's a AI web search engine. If you look at my screen over here, you can go ahead and see that you basically can ask it anything. It's Google, but with much more AI centered effectively. It utilizes large language models to help answer your questions. It's not a bad platform in my opinion. It's pretty okay. You can even go out and choose which model you want to use. They even have their own in-house models. So it's actually very, very cool. It's not a bad platform at all. They do actually have a pretty sustainable business model because they also sell this platform to businesses. They are a B2C and B2B company, so they sell professional versions of Perplexity to just standard consumers with upgraded features, as well as professional versions of Perplexity to businesses, so they can go ahead and grok through, and I don't mean grok by the model, but I mean just the concept of searching through things through their own internal knowledge bases or code or documents or whatever it may be. So some companies are using this effectively as an internal search engine because that's what they're providing. And it's not a bad service whatsoever. Apple apparently is actually quite interested in this and is looking for a piece of the pie. So according to Bloomberg, Apple executives were holding internal talks about potentially bidding for the startup Perplexity, citing people with knowledge of the matter, at least according to Bloomberg. To be honest, I can actually quite trust Bloomberg. Bloomberg has, I don't know what kind of whistleblowers they have over at Apple, because Apple is a very scary company. They hire, ex-military for their security team, okay? They're scary. Those people, you don't want to mess with them. But Bloomberg manages to get these incredible whistleblowers who will just talk the town and tell Bloomberg everything. It's really funny to me. But anyways, and Bloomberg's usually right too. When it comes down to Apple, Bloomberg has it on typically extraordinarily good authority when they say something. So it's a fairly big deal. So the discussions are at an early stage and might not lead to an offer, and the tech behemoth's executives have not discussed a bid with Perplexity's own management. Perplexity, at least when Reuters went out to request for a comment, basically said that we have no knowledge of any current or future merger and acquisition discussions involving Perplexity. So basically Perplexity is saying, as far as I'm aware, no company wants us right this second. So at least according to Perplexity, they haven't gotten reached out by any other company. Apple is internally thinking about it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually going to go out and do it yet. Apple isn't really a company that that tends to acquire other companies. They tend to be within their own shell most of the time. Sometimes they'll get on other companies and other leadership, but it's very rare. It's a very rare occurrence for them to do that. They don't do it often. They don't acquire other companies very often. And even then, they're typically very small, tiny pieces of the puzzle, typically to create applications on Apple's ecosystem, never really hardware. and not really anything in like the web app sphere anyways. Typically it's the only companies I've seen Apple really acquire in the last like 5 years or so are companies that make like photo editing apps and stuff like that. I think Apple recently acquired one of those companies, and I think a company that also does mobile device management, which is basically a thing for businesses so that they can control their own ecosystem of phones, because sometimes businesses will hand out phones to their employees. Apple doesn't really get big companies, so this would be different for them. Doing an acquisition or a merger so big would be very new for them. This is way outside their like comfort zone. This is not what they do. They never do this. Now, this does kind of track with something that has been leaked before, wherein Apple wants to eventually make their own AI-powered search engine. This would track pretty well for that, if you think about it, because, well, here's an AI-powered search engine. They could just acquire the company. It would track very well for them. So, like, if you keep that in mind, and the fact that, yeah, Apple does want to make... no, ignore that. I just knocked something over. But if you keep that in mind, and the fact that Apple does want to make a AI-powered search engine, and eventually wants to stop having to pay Google for licensing fees and all of that, you know, it kind of puts it into perspective why they might do something like this. It does make some sense. Now, Apple, of course, didn't immediately respond to Reuters for comment. That doesn't surprise me. And I think another thing that's quite interesting about this is the fact that this might mark a new trend of having some of these AI companies that are falling behind follow the pattern of just throw money at the problem. Because Meta has been doing some insane money throwing. They've been getting a bunch of people that wouldn't normally have joined Meta by giving them like insane like raises and stuff like that. They're doing insane investments. Meta recently invested 14.8 billion US dollars in a startup called Scale AI and hired its CEO. It might mark a new trend of when a tech company falls behind in the AI sphere, just hire more people and that will fix the problem. Which, that's a very tricky move. That's a very look, it could work, but it's dicey. Let's just put it that way. It's dicey. Doing something so throwing money at the problem isn't always the solution, and if you aren't 100% confident that that's actually going to solve the underlying issue, then it will burn you. It will burn a hole through your pocket. Genuinely, it will. Especially because at the scale of how some of these acquisitions are, even though that these are still fairly big companies, like Meta is a pretty big company. Apple is like the most valued company in the entire United States. It is. Its market cap is in like the trillions. I think the market value for Apple is more money than any one human being has on their bank account. I think it's more than Elon Musk has in his bank account, like in terms of like net worth. So it's like a big company, but making these big investments they still count. It's still a chunk of money. Especially 14.8 billion. That's a pretty big deal. At least like with Meta's not acquisition, but investment in Scale AI. That's still a pretty big deal. That's a sizable chunk of money. So, I don't know. I see why some of these companies with the money to spare is trying to go the route of throw money at the problem, but is that really going to solve things? I'm not too sure. I guess we'll have to see in the long run how this move plays out, and whether or not Perplexity gets acquired by Apple, which would be a very weird thing. 'Cause again, that's unusual for them. They don't usually acquire companies just out of the blue like this. That is about it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Take care, you guys, and remember to stay safe out there.